As I went along my spiritual journey that eventually led me to spiritual awakening, I identified 4 pillars that I think uphold your spiritual awakening, and before you eventually get there, will help you to keep your ego in check along the way in order for you to go within and focus on yourself, in order for you to eventually reach spiritual awakening. The first pillar of awakening is unconditional love, which is the compass by which you should gauge every situation in life. Every single time something is happening to you, every single time someone says or does something to you, every single time you want to say or do something to others or to you, try and see if the reason why those things are done, said, about to be done, about to be said, or if you are considering doing them or saying them, try and see if the source is unconditional love and not your ego. Because every single time your ego does something or tries to convince you to do something or say something, it is never for your best interest. Your ego does not want you to remember who you are, which is what spiritual awakening is. Therefore, every single thing that your ego does has for ultimate goal to keep you anchored in this 3D material world. Now, don't get me wrong, as I said it countless times, your ego is the tool that you need in order for you to navigate this 3D world. But that is all that the ego is. The ego is just a tool. And since the ego tries to prevent you from remembering who you are and keeps you deeply anchored in this 3D world of ours, every single thing it does is not done out of unconditional love, because unconditional love is the first thing, the number one tool that you have at your disposal to remember who you are. It's once you have reached a certain level of spirituality, or even better, reach spiritual awakening, you understand that it makes complete sense. Because when you remember who you are, that is the higher self, source, God, call it whatever you want, you also understand that source, the higher self, God, is love. Only love. On the 5D level, there is only love. There is not even the concept of hatred, because love and hatred are dualistic concepts, right? You cannot, in this 3D world of ours, understand what love is if you don't understand what hatred is. But that is on a 3D level of existence, in this material world of ours. But on a 5D level, where the higher self, God, source, resides, where we are all one, there is only love. Because love is the energy of creation. And the higher self, God, source, is creation. Whereas hatred is the energy of destruction. And since we come from creation on a spiritual 5D point of view, there cannot be on a 5D level anything but love, because on a 5D level everything is creation. You come across the concept of destruction in this 3D world of ours. And as I said countless times before, in this world you have a few laws that you have to deal with when you navigate it. Those laws are, among others, the law of attraction, the law of gravity, the law of duality. And duality is what allows you to understand on a 3D level what all those 3D concepts are. So in this 3D level of existence, we understand love because we understand its opposite, that is hatred. But on a 5D level of existence, which is only love and creation, there is no such concept as destruction. Therefore, the higher self, source, God, call it whatever you want, is unconditional love. And every single time you apply unconditional love on a 3D level, it gets you this much closer to remembering who you are. That is, God, the higher self, source, call it whatever you want, on a 5D level. And when you have unconditional love for yourself, then you cannot treat yourself badly. You can only act out of respect for this 3D meat suit of yours. And you do not do anything that will damage it. Same goes with relationships, for instance. When you have unconditional love for people, it doesn't mean that you are allowing them to do anything they want. Because some of the things that people can do to you can be actually hurtful to you on a mental level, psychological level, and of course on a physical safety level. But if they do things like that, then they themselves are not acting out of unconditional love for you. Therefore, if you use unconditional love as your compass in life, and you realize that they are not acting out of unconditional love for you, despite the fact that you might have been acting out of unconditional love for them, then it behooves you to take the right action. That is, either tell them that what they did was not loving and please, could you not do it again? Or if you do not want to, because it is a choice, to explain yourself, you cut them off of your life and you go on your merry way. Now, unconditional love is a bit of a tricky concept for people because people think that when you love someone unconditionally, you let them off with everything. You let them say and do everything and anything. That is not what it is. What unconditional love is always a two-way street. Everything you do for someone that you love unconditionally has to have a reciprocity, meaning that they have to love you unconditionally as well. And even though this video could last for hours if I went into the detail of it, I'm going to just touch upon one thing that is qualifying unconditional love pretty nicely, I think. It is the absence of control or desire for control. When you love someone unconditionally, it means that you accept them for who they are and you do not try to change them. You do not try to mold them to your own liking, if you will. That is because when you act out of unconditional love, you mute your ego. And the ego loves control. The ego loves control so much that it doesn't get enough fun out of trying to control you, but it also tries to control others. How does it do that? When you love someone or think you love someone, or when you are in love with someone or think you are in love with someone, and you do not act out of unconditional love, sometimes the person of the subject of your affection will say things that does not please you, will do things that do not please you. And if you analyze why you don't like that, why you don't like the things they said or did, provided, again, that it doesn't threaten your physical safety and or your psychological safety, even though that part is a little bit of a murky place, which I will not get into in this video. Every single time you feel like they didn't say what you wanted them to say, you're coming from a place of control. You're coming from a place where the ego whispered in your ear, figuratively speaking, that they didn't like what they said. Therefore, you should make them say what you want them to say because you have to make them say what you want to hear. Same goes with deeds. You didn't like what they did, so you'll tell them to do what you want them to do because you didn't like what they did and you want them to do what you want them to do. That is coming from a place of control. And when there is control, there is a lack of unconditional love. When there is control, your ego is the master and you are the slave to it. You are doing what your ego is telling you to do. You are not accepting someone for all their, for lack of better words, qualities and flaws that they have. where in actuality, we are not perfect. No one is perfect. Therefore, if you truly, truly love someone, you will embrace their flaws just as much as their qualities. You will not try you will not try to correct their flaws, which again is very subjective, right? What is a flaw? To some people, it is a quality. To some people, this flaw is a quality. To other people, that flaw is indeed a flaw and not a quality, and vice versa. So the best way for you to see if someone is acting out of unconditional love to you, and the best way for you to see if you are acting out of unconditional love to them, is to see if there is any ounce of control in their behavior, in your behavior. If there is, as I said, then you have two options. You either tell them that they are being controlling and please don't do that again, or you choose not to explain yourself, you cut them off and you go on your merry way. But that is always, always, always the best way to see if someone's behavior towards you is rooted in unconditional love or control. And it is also the same thing for you when your ego is telling you something, as I said, which is, the ego is a tool for you to navigate this world. So the ego will tell you, you should achieve this, you should achieve that. That is all fine and well, because without the ego, we wouldn't have the will, the desire to achieve things in life, right? But as I said countless times before, the minute the ego tells you that, it will tell you that you won't be able to achieve what you want to achieve, that you are not strong enough, not smart enough, not beautiful enough, whatever the case may be. And when the ego does that, if it is a little tricky for you to see if it is to your own best interest, then again, use unconditional love as a compass. You want to do something, you want to achieve something. That is coming from a place of trying to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. That is all fine and well. But the minute that the ego goes on and say, well, you won't be able to do that, then use unconditional love. Is that loving? No, it's not. So disregard what the ego has to say and focus on the thing that you're trying to achieve. It's, how can I say this? Most of the time when something, or let's go with people, most of the time when people try to control you, it is because they haven't found yet a way to truly love themselves. And so their ego, being unable to make them love themselves, will try to use control upon people, use control on people in order for them to feel superior and to feel better about themselves. But that is not the way to go about if you want to love yourself. Every single time, as I said, you try to control someone, you are acting out of anything but unconditional love. And so when someone acts out of control, for instance, as I said, you have two choices. But whatever the choice you decide to take, keep in mind that they themselves, as a drop of source, are not a bad person. They are not bad people. It is just that they are controlled by their ego for the time being. And the fact that they try to control you, to be hurtful to you, what it boils down to is their inability to love themselves. Their inability to truly understand who they are. That is, the higher self, source, God, call it whatever you want, but all those things is love. And if it is any consolation to you, if you choose to put some distance between you and them because they didn't act out of unconditional love, keep in mind that their essence, that is the drop of source that they are, that we all are, is still lovable, is still unconditionally lovable. It doesn't mean that you have to like the masks and the costumes that their ego will make them wear. But it absolutely means that you have to never stop loving unconditionally the drop of source that they are, that you are, that everybody is. To love someone unconditionally doesn't mean that you have to like them. Because loving is on a 5D level, on a level of unconditional love, on a level of source 5D love. Liking is on an ego level. So you can love your enemy because you love the drop of source that they are. But you do not have to like the person that they are, the person, aka the costume and the mask that their ego makes them wear and that they choose to wear. Because at the end of the day, it is always a choice. Whether you follow your ego and fall into the trap of being dishonest with yourself and others, or you decide to use your ego as the tool that it is, focus solely on unconditional love, and be as honest as you can be, as true to source as you can be, as true to the drop of source that you are. Because at the end of the day, we are all drops of source that chose to incarnate in each and every one of us in order to experience what this beautiful world has to offer. And that is all we are. And if we want to stick to experiencing the best life we can possibly have while we are in this present incarnation in this 3D world, then we have to use unconditional love as our compass.